This is Work University, episode 41. This is the Work University podcast where I conduct informational interviews to see what jobs are really like. If you're interested in learning about careers, follow me on Instagram at work.university. Now let's get into it. Hi, today I am talking with Crystal, who is an EMT, which is an emergency medical technician. Welcome, Crystal.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you know what, let's jump right into it. What is an EMT?
Okay, so quick way to describe it. So there's EMS, which is the entire field of emergency medical services, and that ranges from EMTs to paramedics to ER technicians or, even emergency doctors and nurses. EMTs specifically, emergency medical technicians, are the emergency personnel who work in ambulances. So we're kind of the first step of an emergency, where, patients are on their way to a hospital. So there you can be an ER tech. So those are the same certification that an emergency medical technician would have, except that they do the emergency things that need to get done inside of a hospital for an emergency. So it's kind of a little breakdown.
So for an EMT, are you the first emergency responder, or is it a transport, or can you go into more detail exactly the EMT role?
Yeah, of course. So EMTs work in a variety of fields. I personally don't run 911 calls because those 911 calls are usually run by the fire department. You can work as an EMT with a fire department, or you can get hired as a private ambulance company, which is what I do. So we don't run 911 calls. We do mainly transports of patients from, let's say, one hospital to another hospital, or we do deal with a lot of discharges. So a lot of patients who are being discharged from the hospital need constant supervision to be transported home or to a nursing facility, for example. So it's a lot more back and forth with what I do. But it's still under the same wing of, patient care.
Okay. When you get a call and you are in the truck, I'm assuming, I'm trying to visualize this, how many people are with you besides the patient?
Yeah, so a couple of different ways that I work is we have what are called BLS shifts, which are basic life support. For those BLS shifts, there are 2 EMTs in an ambulance. Then there are ALS shifts, which are advanced life support shifts, and with those ones, there's 1 EMT and 1 paramedic. Paramedics have a higher scope of practice, so they are able to do more things for a patient than an EMT can. And usually doctors are the ones who sign off a transport and will say this patient requires an ALS transport or this patient requires a BLS transport, depending on how severe their condition is and how much care they need during a transport. And then there are CCT shifts, which are critical care transports. In those transports, there are 2 EMTs and 1 nurse. So those ones are a level above ALS, and those patients are in critical condition, and they need a nurse, 2 EMTs, and sometimes a doctor or a respiratory therapist will ride along as well.
Okay, so does the BLS, ALS, and CCT have their own shifts? Or can you sprinkle in some calls for BLS, some calls for ALS and CCT within one shift?
So you can always you can always downgrade a call, but you shouldn't be upgrading a call. So by that I mean if I'm running a BLS shift one day, I can't upgrade my call to an ALS because I don't have a paramedic with me, and so I don't have the authority to care for a patient ALS because I'm BLS with just one other EMT. But if I'm on an ALS shift and a call doesn't necessarily require a paramedic and it's a BLS transport, that's okay because we have the minimum, which is, 2 EMT certifications. Same goes for CCT. We can't, if it's an ALS shift where it's an EMT and a paramedic, you can't run a call that requires a nurse because, of course, there's no nurse on board.
Okay, so let's get back to you and your positions. How do you get that position? Is it something that you have to be certified for? Can you apply for it? Do you have to be working in a clinical setting beforehand? What kind of experience is needed for this?
So I went ahead and did an EMT course at a private university, and my course specifically was about 7 or 8 weeks long, and it was like 3 days a week, 7 hours per day, and you go through all your basic life support skills that you need to know. You have your CPR, your first aid, then you have like the more science courses that you need to do, so your anatomy, physiology, and all those basics. So once you complete that course and you take all your examinations, you need to get nationally certified. So that's an exam that you take, and once you pass that exam, you get your certification. And then you have to get certified within the county that you want to work in, and that necessarily isn't another exam. Uh-huh. So every county has separate needs or things that you need to have, so kind of like a checklist of what you need to have done in order to be certified in that county. So, and those are just, your basics, fingerprinting, background checks. You need to turn in your national certification saying that I took this, so I'm certified at a national level. And then your California or whatever state driver's license, all those things that you need to get done. Then once you get certified there, you can apply. Some companies require previous experience, so those ones you would need to say, I already worked as an EMT or ER tech. For those who are just starting to apply, it's a little more difficult because, everyone needs to start somewhere and you might not have experience. But you can have shadowing experience, so what are called ride-alongs, where you can go to any fire station or any company and say, hey, I'm a student in an EMT class and I want to ride along to see what it's like. Most of the time, companies are pretty lenient on that, so they'll let you ride along for the day, whereas you're in the ambulance for an entire shift.
Oh, that's
you can get experience that way. Yeah.
Yeah, or you can find out that, hey, this isn't for me.
Exactly, yeah.
So do the county certification requirements change from county to county? And let's say you moved, would you have to, take any kind of any classes or courses to make up for the changes?
Yeah, so from county to county, certain, scopes of practice and things may vary, which is why it's important that before working in a certain county, you need to make sure you have all of your certifications and requirements for that specific county. As far as moving from county to county, you can always, double check in the new county that you're working or trying to work for and say, hey, this is what I have. Is there anything additional that I need, or do I need to update certain certifications? And then they'll let you know.
So, Crystal, what do you like most about being an EMT?
My favorite part about being an EMT is talking with patients. When I first started my EMT school, one of the paramedics who were teaching us kind of said something that stuck with me, and it's that you need to remember that every single time that you're working with a patient, you're seeing them on what could possibly be their worst day. So to you, it's just another day, work. But to them, they've either been in the hospital for several days, or this is the worst condition they've been in before, so they're not having a good time. So it's always nice knowing that they're putting their trust in you to take care of you and to, in a way, make you feel better. So that's my favorite part, is kind of having a patient from the beginning to end and seeing how they may be, not feeling the best at the beginning of the day, but maybe if I can get a couple smiles or laughs or, conversations out of them that make their transport better, then that makes me feel good.
Is there any kind of measures that you guys can go against that they had a certain experience, or I guess a survey, like a customer satisfaction survey?
Yeah, there isn't really. Some patients, if they wanted to, they could go to, our company's website and try to contact management that way, as far as whether they have a grievance or, they felt like their transport exceeded expectations, and they can do it that way. But it's not necessarily day-to-day feedback.
So now, on the opposite end of that spectrum, what is something that is not as desirable about this position that maybe people don't know about?
I think the main thing people should be aware of are the hours. Most companies will have either between like 10 and 12-hour shifts, and then that can go up depending also where you work. So I know of a lot of, EMTs who are working with fire stations. With the fire department, they even go up to, to 24 or 48-hour shifts, which can be a long time, No one wants to be on the clock that long. But you do have a solid amount of downtime that I like to call, which is where you're waiting between calls. But then you have those days where the entire 11 or 12-hour shift, it is just back-to-back calls, which can be pretty tiring, especially if, you're driving all day. So you kind of just have to make sure you keep yourself energized because you have a patient's life in your hands.
Yeah. And so do you take shifts driving, or do you switch off with the other people or your coworkers?
Yeah, so depending on how your schedule is like, it's going to be a little different. For me, for my full-time schedule, I rotate with my partner. So I have a full-time partner that I rotate with. I will drive one day, and then the next day I'm what is called attending. So when you're the attending EMT, you're the one that's in the back of the ambulance with the patient, taking vitals, making sure they're stable, making sure, they're comfortable, et cetera. But on the days that you're driving, you're the one in charge of getting, patient from point A to point B. And you can just, usually I switch off, but it depends. Sometimes, things happen. You're not feeling up to driving one day. So you'll ask, hey, can I attend today? And, vice versa.
So from the perspective of somebody who may want to get into this, it sounds like you're only called when something's on fire, so to speak. So how much would you say customer service experience falls into this role?
I think a lot of customer service experience. At the end of the day, you're there to make sure that your patient is healthy and safe. But in order to do that, I think you need to build rapport with patients. And I think the very difficult part of that is you only see a patient for, however long a transport is. So you almost have to try harder to make an impression and to tell this person, hey, I understand you're not feeling well, but I am doing everything I can to make sure that you're comfortable and you feel safe. So it's harder when you don't have a lot of time to do that, but, you just do your best as anything as little as, hey, can I put a pillow under your head? Or, hey, I noticed that your hip is in pain. Can I lift your left hip? Small things like that, which I think are, really important, but kind of tedious at the end of the day because it's a very small aspect of their entire healthcare, experience.
So as part of your training, do you have to take any driver's courses, especially with an emergency vehicle?
Yeah, so you need to, of course, have your driver's license, and then you need to have an ambulance driver's license. So that's one of those other certifications that you need to send in to your county. So you need to go to the DMV and take a written ambulance driver's exam. They offer, booklets on how to study for it and things like that. And it's basically just how to manage an ambulance as far as the lights and sirens and how fast you should or shouldn't go. Yeah, it's definitely a course that you need to know how to do.
Mm-hmm. Especially, it seems like such a big vehicle to maneuver in, smaller spaces.
Yep, exactly. And the craziest part is that ambulance parking lots inside hospitals, which are called ambulance bays, you would think they'd have a lot of space, but a majority of them are super crammed at the back of a hospital. So you have 4 or 5 ambulances all coming in trying to park in these really tiny spots. So it's all about pivot points and having your partner as a backer when you can, just being safe.
So how does that work if there's multiple vehicles trying to get into one bay? Do you have to communicate the level of severity, or do you have to just wait in line?
So the point of being in an ambulance is you want to be able to get in and get out. It's not always possible to have a spot because, emergencies are emergencies. You don't plan for them. So if an ambulance bay is extremely crowded and you're one of the ambulances, let's say, hey, we're here to pick up this patient or we're here to drop off this patient, you need to make sure that you're doing things with, efficiency and being time time aware, aware of the time and trying to rush your way out because you need to know, like, hey, there's ambulances coming in and they need to bring in a patient who is having an emergency. So just being aware of your surroundings and know that if you don't need the spot because you already dropped off your patient and you're just trying to finish up your paperwork in the ambulance, pull out your ambulance, park somewhere else on the street to finish your paperwork or whatever the case is.
Now, when I hear or see ambulances coming down the road, are they ever doing tests to see how you can make it through, or is it always an emergency situation?
As far as an ambulance driving with lights and sirens?
Yes.
I would say 99% of the time it's an emergency. I've never, throughout my entire course of training to become an EMT, I've never driven on the street with my lights and sirens just for the sake of practicing.
I've always just kind of wondered that. Thank you for clearing that up, Crystal.
Yeah.
My last question is, what advice do you have for anyone who wants to look at this as a career and wants to head down that direction?
Yeah. So my main advice is really try to research as much as you can prior to any step you take towards becoming an EMT. So let's say you want to start an EMT course. They can be pretty costly, and I wouldn't want anyone to take the course and then have to, after paying, let's say thousands of dollars to take the course, realize, I actually don't really want to do this, which happens, sometimes that's unavoidable. But, just setting yourself up for success, researching as much as you can. Talk to any EMT that you see. If you're on the street and you see someone who looks like, hey, I think they work on an ambulance and it looks like they're not doing anything, I'm just going to go up to them and ask them. I've had someone come up to me at a hospital and ask me, and I think it was a patient's family member in a hospital asking me. And they were like, oh, you know what? I actually don't think I would want to do that now that you say that, which, I was super grateful for because I know they're not going to waste their time or money. And then as far as once you're working, just talk to as many people. So I know of a lot of people who became an EMT and then thought, you know what, I actually want to take this a step further and now I want to be a paramedic. Or they talk to nurses or doctors and say, hey, actually I want to be a nurse. And hey, I want to be a doctor. Because you see a lot of different professions in the field because you are in and out of hospitals all day. So I just think doing research, talking to as many people as you can, and always being open to learn and, realize that you don't know everything and it's okay not to know everything. When I first started, I really was kind of nervous thinking I had to know everything, anything and everything about a diagnosis. And so I kind of let that scare me sometimes as far as I don't know what I'm doing. How do I know I'm helping this person? But just taking it day by day and be open to learning. And I think that'll be the best way you can succeed in the role of an EMT.
Good information. Thank you so much, Crystal, for sharing your experience. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks again for having me. I hope this can help anyone who's interested in EMS.
I hope you found this valuable. Is there a job you want to learn about? Contact me on Instagram at work.university or email me at hello@workuniversity.org. Thanks for listening.